Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Padma Kamath, and I'm Director, Regulatory and Scientific Affairs at the Global Self-Care Federation. I hope you can hear my voice loud and clear, and you can also see my video. If not, please leave us a note in the chat box. So just a couple of topics for today. It's a pleasure. I will just hand over right away to our moderator for the day, who is Mr. Ben Thornton Jones. Ben is the Director of Sustainable Supply Chain at Haleon, where he drives performance against Haleon's global sustainability commitments related to upstream supply chain, with key focus areas being Scope 3 greenhouse gas emission reduction, human rights, sustainable sourcing of key material, supply chain due diligence and legislation, and of course, nature, biodiversity, stewardship. So I wish you all the best. Please take the moment to chat and ask questions as much as possible. And Ben, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Padma. So yeah, a warm welcome to everyone that's joining today. We're looking forward to a really good session with a wide panel of experts and representatives right across the board, talking about what is a very interesting, important but challenging topic around sustainable supply chains and all an area that we need to drive very hard to work on. So you can see here we've got the agenda for today. After our introductions and welcomes, I just want to make a few opening statements just to set the scene, and then we'll get started on our panel presentations and discussions ranging between the supplier perspective, challenges facing SMEs and the need for collective action. We've got representation from a group called the PSCI, which Alejandro will explain more on. Also, a third-party group, Manufacture 2030, that provide a platform for suppliers to collate information, and also, some information around the Global Self-Care Federation questionnaire, the background to that that's been pulled together, and the GHG guidance document. And then we're going to finish with asking some questions, and then close the session, and hopefully it will be really informative to everyone that's joined the call. So I just wanted to set the scene for everyone. There's a lot of information that you could share on this, and we could have a webinar just on understanding the climate impact. But I just wanted to share a couple of reflections from my side, just at a high level. So, of course, greenhouse gases, there's a range of them you can see in the graphic on the left-hand side there. But I wanted to focus in on what people talk a lot about, which is carbon, or specifically carbon dioxide. And the reason that most people talk about this is, well, it's the most abundant greenhouse gas of all of them. Reports say it accounts for about 2/3 of the greenhouse gases, and is largely the product of burning fossil fuels, so, interacting with human action. The result of this volume of particularly CO2, but the range of GHGs going into the atmosphere, is that we have global average temperatures increasing by more than 1% since pre-industrial times. And it's not going to stop there. Global warming is expected to reach or exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius versus present levels. And that, as you may have seen in various reports coming out centrally, will have serious consequences on life on Earth as we know it. And I think we're already seeing real impacts of that right across the world already today, and it could only get worse. So it's a key focus area we need to work on. So just moving forward, what we're going to talk a lot about today, just wanted to bring a bit of awareness around some of the terminology. Some of this, a lot of the people listening into this panel and to this webinar may know already, but what we're going to talk a lot today around carbon emissions is scopes 1, 2 and 3. And just the graphic you can see on the left-hand side there just explains, and that's the terminology most widely used around talking about emissions factors and the footprint of various businesses, governments, and even personal people in their own lives. And to explain scope 1, when we talk about that, those are the direct emissions that can be produced. In a business sense, this may well be a factory that is burning coal potentially to run a boiler, and that is creating carbon emissions factors at that site. So those are direct emissions. Scope 2 are the indirect emissions that, using this example again, a business could have, because that same factory requires electricity to be wired in to run the lights and run various other electrically driven requirements. The burning of fossil fuels may not have been made at that site, but at some point it has been made to create the electricity that has been pumped to that factory. Those are called Scope 2 indirect emissions. And then the final piece, which is really relevant to the conversation today, is other indirect emissions, which are called Scope 3, which for ease of the explanation is everything else. This could be the purchase of goods and services that go into, in this example again, a factory, capital goods, distribution upstream and downstream of goods around the world and to customers, consumer use of products, as well as the end of life and disposal, as well as other categories. And it's a really big space. And around reducing all of these impacts, there's a real focus to make, because to meet the goals for us not to exceed that 1.5 degree temperature rise globally means that emissions need to be reduced by 45% by 2030 from 2010 levels, and to reach net zero emissions by 2050. So the remit is there. So then just coming into a lot of the focus that we'll have today and the reason for this group, if we just move forward, why are we focusing a lot on the supply chain? Well, this stat, and you can find varying ones, but the vast majority in this statistic, 80%, that's the share of consumer emissions that reside in supply chains. And for the business that I work for, it's no different. The majority of our carbon footprint as Haleon, as a consumer healthcare company, is upstream with the goods and services that we buy in before we even start manufacturing products in our own sites and delivering downstream to our customers. So it's a huge focus area to work on if we're going to meet these goals. And by being part of the Global Self-Care Federation in this particular supply chain group, it's been really beneficial that the key focus areas are defining that common criteria for supplier evaluation, so they can really work with our suppliers and supply chain on a standardized way of approaching sustainability and emissions. We also need to provide guidance, which the group does as well, to suppliers on best practices and how to gather data. And also we want to engage with a broader audience, which hopefully you can see from the agenda today. We've got representatives from the PSCI, also from Manufacture 2030, as well as other colleagues who are part of the Global Self-Care Federation. So hopefully that's been okay to set the scene for everybody, but we're going to move into some really interesting topics and speakers that we have for you today. And the first one of those is Giulia Ferrati. Giulia is the Director of Corporate Responsibility and Sustainability at AmerisourceBergen. She leads the environmental, social and governance strategy and stakeholders engagement for AmerisourceBergen's European business. And prior to joining, Giulia held different roles in ESG at All Green Boots Alliance, as well as sales and operations in other industries. So I'll pass it over to Giulia, but just with the final thing to say is, if any questions from any of the content I've shared, or Giulia or any of our other speakers do, please put them in the Q&A chat and we'll try and get onto them at the end.
Thank you very much. And I'm very happy to join part of the conversation. Very important that there is a collaboration within the industry around specifically emissions and Scope 3 emissions. As mentioned, I'm the Director of Corporate Responsibility and Sustainability at AmerisourceBergen. AmerisourceBergen is a global healthcare company, and the foundation is pharmaceutical distribution and solutions for manufacturers, pharmacies, and providers. And so AmerisourceBergen, just to give a little bit of background on the organization and our commitments, and then how, as a supplier, we find challenges in terms of supply chain emissions. Scope 3 emissions is a big topic at the moment. So AmerisourceBergen have a commitment to reduce emissions. So we have an approved and validated science-based target, approved by Science-Based Target Initiative, and we are committed to reduce our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions by 54.6% by 2032. 2022. We also have a commitment on our supply chain emissions. So we are committed to engage our top 83% of suppliers to ensure we also have a commitment to reduce emissions and a target validated by the Science Based Target. We obviously are committed to partnerships and to share our information and progress with stakeholders. So we report and produce an ESG report, which is aligned with the international framework. So with obviously the environmental information are aligned with the GHG protocol, but we report information aligned with Global Reporting Initiative, Carbon Disclosure Project, TCFD. So there's a wide range of information that we transparently share with stakeholders. Currently all, as mentioned by Ben, all organizations are now looking to reduce emissions, and emissions not only from operations, but also indirect emissions from the supply chain. And as supply chain emission require a lot of collaboration, partnerships, influence on suppliers. What the current requests are is to understand what is the impact that supplier has on broadly the supply chain emissions of an organization, a customer for us. So what we're really being asked to provide is that type of apportionment. And as this is an area that is currently under development, there isn't a format specific to request all these informations. So we're currently approached with different formatting and the scope also of what the informations relevant to a specific organization can be. Of course, as we are committed to provide, and we are committed to provide accurate and consistent data, having different methodologies to work with, the challenges in terms of resources, timing that goes into providing the information, and most importantly, all the information that are provided will be the basis of what we want to measure our progress against, and therefore there needs to be and this is the important work that we are discussing today of harmonizing how informations are shared. And at the end of the day, all organizations are looking to reduce the impact not only from operations but from supply chain. Therefore, we need to better harmonize how we are measuring and collecting the data, so we can actually see we can actually have better impact on the environment.
Thanks, Julia. That was really, really insightful just to hear a perspective from a supplier point of view. And it sounds like really great progress that you're making as a company, but you know the challenges are still there to engage with the supply chain. So thanks for the perspective. Great. Where are we going to go next? So actually our next speaker, we've actually got a video because unfortunately Ben couldn't join us because of some personal reasons, but just to introduce him before we put the video on that he's recorded for us. Bent Mattsson is the policy manager at the Swedish Association of Pharmaceutical Industry, responsible for sustainable development, AMR, which is antimicrobial resistance, vaccines and supply reliability in drug shortages. In 2005, he became the chairman of the Environmental Committee of LIF and has since January 2014 acted as co-chair of the EFPIA, which is the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations, lots of acronyms here, Task Force on Pharmaceuticals and the Environment. Today, a joint initiative between the three industry associations. He is also a member of the AESGP's and EFPIA's environmental health and safety expert groups. So you can see, even if you didn't understand that, he is hugely experienced in this space. And let's hear some of his thoughts based on the video that he recorded kindly for us.
My key message today will be harmonization is key. I'm extremely happy to see the initiative that we've taken at the Global Self-Care Federation to make a questionnaire that could be used across the industry. And I really hope that we will see this questionnaire also being shared and used by other parts of our industry, like the innovative pharmaceutical industry, the generic industry, so on and so forth. Harmonization of these questionnaires are being sent out almost on a daily basis from actors in the industry, and harmonization, of course, will make it much easier for suppliers in the supply chain network to respond, because there will be one way of doing this. It'll also be easier, in my opinion, for the companies that actually do send out these kind of questionnaires, if we manage to have this harmonization, because that will somehow help developing a standardized way of doing this. Environmental impacts needs to be measured, needs to be communicated, but there is no real standardized way today, and this is an important step in that direction. In order to be able to respond to these kinds of questions in questionnaires like this, of course, it's important to have sources of knowledge. You will hear later on during today on PSCI, the Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Initiative, on M2030, but also briefly on that guidance document that the Global Self-Care Federation is developing. And I really encourage everyone here to ask questions on the questionnaire in itself, on that guidance document, come in with proposals on how we could, what we should add on or make adjustments before we finalize the documents. My role, however, is actually to stress a little bit more on the SME perspective, small and medium-sized enterprises. And pretty obvious, it could be more challenging for SMEs than the bigger actors in the sector to respond to questions like this, but also to evaluate responses from questionnaires like this if you're an SME. So the need for these sources of knowledge like PSCI M2030, the guidance document, is perhaps even more crucial. And I also think it's worth to mention that if you, depending on where you are in the supply chain, if you're a downstream or an upstream type of a supplier, Julia's presentation was a little bit more like downstream, closer to the end of the life cycle, so to speak. A lot on transportation, obviously. Upstream suppliers will have probably an even tougher challenge when it comes to capture all the different impacts, and especially greenhouse gas emissions. Your scope 3 type of emissions could be very complex. And as you know, scope 1 very often quite simple. You're looking on your own operations directly. Scope 2, energy purchased into your own facility or your operation. Scope 3 is more your supplier and stakeholder network. And the further up in the supply chain network, the more difficult it becomes. So I really urge everyone, especially if you have complex scope 3 type of areas, to really try to get the knowledge you need in order to respond correctly to questionnaires like this. So coming back to my key message, harmonization, I think it's key. It will help developing some kind of a standardized methodology. Don't be shy in coming back with questions to us, to others, before we finalize the documents, but also afterwards, of course. Just we'll try to help the best we can, but there are also, like you will hear after me now, sources of information from like PSCI and M2030. And harmonization, as I said, is important not only for the suppliers that should respond to questionnaires like this, but also for companies that will evaluate those responses. And my last words, it is tough for everyone, but it could actually even be tougher for the small and medium-sized enterprises. Thanks a lot.
Perfect. Great to hear from Bent there in terms of challenges facing SMEs, and I think a real clear call to action, as he said there, around harmonization. It's really a key focus for this group and for various other groups, and harmonization of standardizing the way that we ask for data to then help identify where we can work on carbon emissions reductions right through the supply chain is going to help everyone from a manufacturer to a large supplier to even small suppliers, if there's one approach and way of doing things rather than multiple methods that creates a lot of confusion and complexity. So great to hear that. And as he said, he mentioned a couple of the next groups that are working on this. So the next one to introduce is the Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Initiative, or the PSCI group, and Alejandro Fiojo is here, and he's partner manager at Carnstone, a management consultancy specialized in sustainability and ESG. He's also the Secretariat representative for environmental topics in the PSCI group. So great to have him here. And Alejandro, over to you to introduce this group.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Ben, and thanks, Padma, for the invitation to speak at this event. Especially thanks for reaching out to find out more about the PSCI and align our efforts, because as the previous speakers, as Ben mentioned also, the key here in the work that we're all doing is that we all act in a very coordinated way that that makes the work easier for all of us as the pharmaceutical manufacturers, but also along the supply chain. So let me tell you a bit about what the work that we're doing here at the PSCI, and I don't know if we can move to the next slide, please. So just to tell you a bit of what the PSCI does and how we have some impact along the supply chain. I'm going to tell you the first three components of the work that we do. First, we have an audit program. The key of this is to enable and facilitate the sharing of audit amongst pharma companies, and therefore create a more global and easier to access overview of the situation in the supply chain. That's the first component. The second component is the capability building program, which I'll dig deeper, talk about in more detail in the few slides. And the third aspect of it is special programs. These three steps are all interconnected to ensure that we can deliver the best outcome for the PSCI members, but also for suppliers in their supply chains who are benefiting from the resources and programs that the PSCI has. In terms of the capability program, this is all about creating resources and capability along the supply chains that enable supplier to become more responsible and perform better in terms of social and environmental aspects. Special programs, just to touch on that briefly, are programs such as the Energize program, or the program that we have developed in the Musi River to tackle the issues there. In terms of the capability building program, we have three main steps. The first one is the PSCI principles, which lay the expectations that PSCI members have on themselves and on their suppliers. I'll talk about this in the next slide. The second step is the maturity model, which shows suppliers how to get there and how to fulfill those expectations in terms of what concrete steps they should be taking. And the third one is the learning plan, which is a map and a group of resources that PSCI members and suppliers can access at no cost, of course, through the PSCI platform. Here we can see the current version of the PSCI principles, and I should mention that the principles are currently under review, have been under review for the past few months, and are due to be updated and the update released in towards the end of May. The PSCI principles cover a wide range of topics going from ethics, human rights and labor, health and safety, environment and management systems. In terms of the environmental principles, which are, I guess, the focus for this session, one of the things that I could mention is that the attention on decarbonization and the attention on the link it has to in terms of biodiversity are things that are being included in this year's update, reflecting what we've seen in the last couple of years. So in the next slide, that's the PSCI principles. The next slide talks about the maturity models. And the idea of the maturity models is to give some more context without being too prescriptive for suppliers to understand what steps they need to take towards fulfilling the PSCI principles. And along the different PSCI principle areas, so for environment, for example, there will be a specific maturity model which will tell suppliers how to progress from being on a starting out level to then developing, implementing, and leading in different areas. So for example, when setting targets, how would the targets and what stage of the target setting should they be to be at each of the different stages? The maturity model has recently been released on a mobile app version, as well as being on the PSCI webpage, and this is just to help suppliers self-assess themselves and position themselves on where they are in this model. And the last component of this is that alongside, in that slide, the tools for learning that we have in our learning plan are aligned to these different maturity levels. So for example, for starting out suppliers, we would recommend some foundational or primary level contents, and there's some more specialized content for those that are implementing. So that's in essence what the PSCI does and how the PSCI can help suppliers access this content. And if you would like to access these resources and learn more about the PSCI, I've left the link there for you to go into our webpage. Thanks.
Great, thanks so much for that. Yeah, really interesting. And I know that we've been part of the PSCI group, and I think it's really great to see the benefit that comes from all of those pharmaceutical companies coming together to set those principles and those standards, provide tools for suppliers, and create the maturity model to give a real journey to work to on what is a complex subject. So definitely go and look into that some more. Okay, let's move forward. So our next guest panelist is Sadia Dahu, who's the head of partnerships of the FMCG sector at Manufacture 2030. Now, Manufacture 2030 provides companies of all sizes with greater certainty that their carbon reduction targets will be met. Sadia's team supports the consumer goods, so the FMCG sector, to adopt the Manufacture 2030 Climate Action Programme, which helps suppliers and buyers to measure, manage and reduce emissions across global supply chains. At Manufacture 2030, they believe that climate change is the challenge of our time, which I think we would all agree with, and empower companies to drive improvements at scale. So great to have you, Sadia, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Ben, and hello to everybody on the call, and thank you for joining us. So yes, just to echo Ben's sentiments there, Manufacture 2030 does exist to provide companies like Haleon, where Ben and I work really closely, with greater certainty that all of these carbon commitments that they're committing to are being met, whilst also identifying opportunities for suppliers to enhance operational and resource efficiency, procure more sustainably, and ultimately drive down costs in operations. And we know now more than ever That's super important. So to do that, we run a climate action program, which is supporting the adoption of reduction projects in over 70 countries globally. And this rises by the day. And through the use of our unique cloud-based platform, we're able to support suppliers in 14 languages. The platform itself houses a growing database of over 550 best practice actions, which suppliers can adopt and use those to drive down emissions and help us help you forecast your savings. So over time, our platform uses its artificial intelligence learning component, which sits behind the engine of the platform, to recommend projects that are specific to your needs. And we do this based on the information that is given over to us by suppliers on an annual basis. This data set is also grown with the support of upwards of 20 independent knowledge partners, such as the US Department for Energy, the Carbon Trust, and many, many others, to ensure that suppliers are making the best-in-class reductions and really are leading the way along with our customers as well. So at Manufacture 2030, we really do focus our reduction efforts in 4 main sectors, namely automotive, grocery retail, pharmaceuticals, and consumer goods, and that's where I sit. And this is to ensure that we're supporting suppliers in reducing in high emission industries. So I've just pulled out on the slide here a few of the global brands that M2030 is working with, because a key part of what we do and a key part of how we've designed the programme is to drive sectoral alignment. We've heard that message really strongly in the session today, and that's a really key part of what we do, is to really work with customers across the sector and allows us to really drive best practice as an industry. So if we pop onto the next slide, I will just talk you through our approach really briefly. And this really sits with, as Ben mentioned, a measure, manage and reduce approach. So reducing scope 3 for us begins with keeping measurements simple and improvements focused. And we do this by starting with gathering a baseline as that critical first step. This allows us to understand where suppliers are right now and where they need to be, and helps us to better tailor the support that we can offer suppliers. It's also the best way for suppliers to meet multiple customers' requirements in one simple exercise. So on an annual basis, we ask suppliers to provide some simple data around their environmental usage. So that's energy, waste and water, and any other projects that they're running in order to build that baseline. We've designed this questionnaire with limited capacity and resources in mind. We know that suppliers and their teams are super busy and often have competing asks from their customers. So we've designed it in a way that means that you should be able to answer this questionnaire in no more than 30 minutes with just your utility bills. And you can also choose to submit your measurements data to any of the customers that work with us and that are relevant to you in one simple submission. We then will support suppliers with demonstrating a clear path to reducing emissions by managing that data in the same platform. And that really is what sets us apart. We only gather historical data to build that baseline, then we move forward to that forward-looking view and can really help you see through glide path reporting how your emissions can come down over time and where those gaps to target are. That's also a really big part of how we've built our reporting as well. All of this allows us to focus suppliers' efforts where it matters most, and that really is on the third part here, which is reducing emissions. So through a whole range of tools, we can support businesses on their sustainability journey from within the platform, and that comes in the form of integrated reporting, which I've mentioned, recommended actions from our AI engine, and then also built-in calculators that help suppliers estimate their scope 1 and 2 carbon emissions, as well as financial savings that are always 100% confidential to them. And if we go on to the next slide, we'll be able to see how these digital tools are also bolstered by our team of people who run the Climate Action Programme. So as much as you'll be able to access the digital platform and database if you are a supplier that works with M2030, we also take that support a step further by assigning you a dedicated Climate Action Manager for your site. So this manager is there to support you every step of the way, from entering baseline information to creating an action plan within the site and then digesting the reports that we produce for suppliers and customers alike. We can also connect suppliers with a growing network of expert knowledge partners to gain their expertise and solve shared challenges. And then that also is supported by a series of webinars, events, case study building exercises, and bespoke trainings that we offer on a year-round basis. Lastly, the last point I want to cover here is that we also want to help suppliers unlock vital capital through green financing in partnership with our expert solution providers. So the aim here really is to ensure that suppliers have all the funding that they need to make the step changes that we know are really, really necessary. So that was just a taster of the support that we can offer suppliers in their sustainability journey to improve their scope 1 and 2, and then in turn demonstrate the progress that you're making to customers by providing clarity in their scope 3. So I'll hand back to Ben, as I know that we are short on time, but thank you for joining us, and hopefully it gives you a bit of a whistle-stop tour through who we are and what we do.
No, really good. Thanks, Sadia. Yeah, really interesting information to go through. And yeah, I can only say that from our point of view as a customer of M2030, we've been using them for a while, and actually we've had the pleasure recently of getting the supplier experience, because M2030 have customers in the UK retailers who we are suppliers of, and so actually using the tool was very, very easy and standardized, and a lot with the ethos of what we've been talking about in this discussion working through. Introducing Kevin Eckel. He's Director Environmental, Social Governance, Operations and Performance in the Consumer Health Division of Bayer, with more than 15 years of experience leading private and public organisations in developing and implementing transformational strategies that leverage sustainability as a driver of value creation. Kevin is a frequent speaker on the sustainability and circular economy, and is the author or co-author of over 15 publications on the value of sustainable business, the circular economy, engaging consumers to promote sustainable decision making, the economics of coal-generated electricity, the impacts of climate change on biodiversity, and ecology of birds. So we have a real expert here to speak. So Kevin, over to you.
Thanks, Ben, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, as the case may be. As Ben said, I am the Director of Environmental, Social, and Governance Operations and Performance at Bayer Consumer Health. And it's been my great pleasure to work with Padma and Purity and a variety of other organizations as part of a working group within GSCF that arose out of the Environmental Sustainability Charter that was issued in November of 2021. We were signatories and have been, and after that charter was issued, two independent but similar working groups were established. The first, which is in operation today, and still moving forward, is focused on packaging materials, and specifically blister packaging, which is a challenge across the industry. And then the second, which is the topic of our discussion today, is focused on Scope 3 emissions, and comes out of the charter, which had three vital components within the charter. First, carbon emissions reductions. Second, packaging, sustainable packaging, and then third, pharmaceuticals in the environment. So with that charter being issued, and since the focus of the supplier carbon work stream, or task force, as the case may be, was to figure out how best that we as an industry could move forward on quantifying our value chain emissions. And early on in the process, the group landed on the idea to create a supplier questionnaire, much as we've been discussing so far today. And in so doing, some of the discussions that were had along the way really focused on exactly what should be in the questionnaire, trying to balance providing buyer companies like Bayer the information that they need, but at the same time, not making the questionnaire onerous for companies that are represented in the supply chain. And then providing and also crafting a single questionnaire that could be used by all players in the industry, stored on a platform, a digital platform, and then shared so that all companies could view anonymized data. And so as a result, sort of create a map of the value chain emissions throughout the industry. The idea was, the thinking continues to be, supply chain emissions is a common challenge. It is an industry challenge. It is not unique to consumer health, but by engaging our supply chain and actors throughout the supply chain, we could enable collaborative carbon emissions reductions, thereby serving our suppliers as well as the brands represented in GSCF. We've worked for about a year, maybe at this point 15 months or so, to craft that questionnaire. And along the way, we recognized a need was to craft guidance. Part of that thinking was that recognizing that 2030, PSCI, and a number of similar initiatives are issuing questionnaires that are very common with especially in the carbon space, more or less standard intent. And so wanting to be additive, not duplicative, we continued to discuss exactly what we wanted to include in the questionnaire, but also how else the activities of the working group within GSCF could benefit representatives in the supply chain. So in addition to the questionnaire, the GSCF has produced a guidance document. And the idea is that for those companies in the value chain of consumer health who may be new to carbon emissions reductions, the guidance document could help you see what are the typical types of questions that companies like Bayer and Haleon and RB and a variety of others may be asking you. And also assist you in developing the tools internally to quantify your carbon footprint, establish targets, and set a path towards carbon emissions reductions. So that's where we are today. We have been reviewing these documents. The guidance document is, Padma, correct me if I'm wrong, but the guidance document is in a very good state, and we are looking to issue that soon. So, but that's sort of the journey we've been on over the last 15 months, and that has led to this. And so, again, it is a great pleasure for me to introduce the work of the GSCF and the Task Force on Scope 3 carbon emissions. And I look forward to the questions throughout the Q&A. Back to you, Ben.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Thanks for putting that all back together at the end there on what the this group has been working on, which I think is really, really good. And again, continues to follow the ethos of what's been talked through today. So that's been all of our speakers. Hopefully that's been very, very useful for everyone here. But I think the opportunity now is to be able to ask some questions of our speakers. So that's the next section that we're going to walk into, which is a bit of a panel discussion, just quizzing a few topics. And then we're also, after that, going to look into the Q&A screen. I know there's been maybe just one or two questions so far, but if anyone's holding back on any that they were thinking of, please put them in the chat and we'll try and get through as many as possible at the very end that come from the discussion here. So get them moving in the chat there. But I can certainly kick things off, and I'll maybe sort of whiz back to the start with Julia, who we had speaking from a supplier's perspective. It'd be great to know, Julia, what do you think are the biggest opportunities for collaboration?
Thank you, Ben. I think there's several opportunities of collaborations. Obviously, we discussed a lot about the measurement of emissions and specifically Scope 3 emissions, and each individual organization obviously is trying to measure what their own impact is. And I think an opportunity area is understanding the apportionment of emissions. So, for example, as a distributor, as a pharmaceutical wholesaler, our impact in terms of our main impact in terms of manufacturers, for example, Scope 3 emission is the distributions of products, and obviously understanding how a consistent methodology even to track that is a great area of is an opportunity, not just from the supplier perspective on how we can measure and provide accurate information, but is also on the on our customers' perspective, how to get consistent information from the entire supply chain, how the measurement and reduction can be consistently tracked. And also, I think there's an opportunity as well of understanding. Obviously, we're talking about supply chain emissions, and we are in the pharmaceuticals and healthcare supply chain, and understanding as well the contribution of specific suppliers, for example. So our main impact is on the probably on the downstream of the supply chain when we are taking products and distributing to the end consumer, pharmacies, hospitals, direct to patients, and harmonizing even the questions that get asked to specific suppliers. And we've done, Amaris and I've done a little bit of a work with the IFPW, the International Pharmaceutical Wholesaling Federations, to understand, well, for example, as a pharmaceutical wholesaler, the ESG topics that we can have a real impact, and how we can, and getting the consistent requests on what we can actually act upon and actually provide support and real action on those. And obviously the aim is to provide information and share, and obviously partner on what is the accountability that the pharmaceutical wholesaling industry have on the reduction of the of the healthcare supply chain environmental impact.
Great, really clear. Yeah, I think there's so much opportunity in this space, and the examples that you gave are really fundamental ones that I think everyone can pick up on, and there's a lot to be able to be found, and especially as being part of collaborative groups, sharing that best practice of other initiatives and collaborations that are available is really beneficial to everyone. It's a challenge though, right? It'd be great to hear from you what you see as a pharmaceutical wholesaler. What are the biggest challenges around Scope 3 emissions that you really see?
Yeah, specifically around Scope 3 emissions, obviously on our customers' Scope 3 emissions. So, obviously the requests and the questionnaires that comes through RFPs or through partnerships that we have with customers is around understanding their scope. So the Scope 3 emissions of our customer related with the business that they do with us. So for us is understanding the breakdown by customers of our Scope 1, Scope 2, and sometimes Scope 3, because when we distribute products, we don't only use our own fleet, but we also rely on distribution partners. So for us, in terms of challenges, while we are activating initiatives to reduce our Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 emissions, is obviously understanding how to apportion those, how to measure the apportionment of emissions for our customers, for example, as well as understanding how to share consistent information, and also how to track how to track and give confidence to our partners that we are doing the right thing to reduce emission and track them on their behalf. Obviously, we are getting into an area where everything that is requested needs to be auditable, needs to be formatted in a certain way, and not having consistent way of requesting this information is becoming more and more challenging, although perhaps initiatives are there to reduce emissions, is almost getting into the details of how to measure them, and is becoming very very complex to provide the correct information.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's a real challenging area that needs a bit more standardization, and everyone's trying to look for that same data but make it very, very accurate. It's a challenge to get to, but hopefully a lot of work being done to bridge that. I'm conscious of time, but I just wanted a few more questions for the panelists that we still have before we then get on to the Q&As in the chat, which still look quite light, but we'll try and get on to a couple of questions that are in there. But Sadia, I wanted to come to you just to ask one question, which I think is really pertinent to the audience and the group that we have here. Obviously, you work across various industries, but particularly active pharmaceuticals ingredients is obviously a key material group that we are all active with within this industry. How can M2030 help API suppliers that are resource intensive to decarbonize?
Yes, fantastic question, Ben, and thank you. And just to echo Julia's point, it's something that, you know, we understand that there's a lot of noise in terms of customer requests, and a really big part of what M2030 is all about is aligning customer ask. So in my role as the head of my vertical, it's about bringing together the likes of Haleon, other consumer brands like Reckitt, together to, one, help standardize the questions that they're asking their suppliers, and then also refine that based on the type of work that they're doing and the emissions that they are producing to make those products for their customers. So APIs is something that's coming through as a really strong point of collaboration at Manufacture 2030, and we know that active pharmaceutical ingredients are a key constituent of medicines and vaccines that are necessary to produce. It's not a nice to have. We need these medications and we need these vaccines. So how do we work with suppliers to make sure that we're meeting the demand, the global demand, and then also can try and combat, you know, the resource intensive manufacturing process that we know is necessary to make these goods. So one way that we have kind of come together to coalesce our pharmaceutical vertical is to really tackle the challenge head on. It's a challenge we need to address together. It's really down to us to really drive that. And one of the ways that we're collaborating is by launching a program called Activate, and that actually launches next week on the 15th of May. And this is a collaborative program that pulls all of the knowledge and the expertise of some of the brands that you saw on screen earlier to have a sector focus on tackling the challenge of decarbonising API suppliers specifically. So to do that, we have brought those brands together to, one, align on the data that they need to build a picture of the situation now in the active pharmaceutical ingredients market, and then design a playbook that has been tailored to this sector. So these brands that are launching Activate include AstraZeneca, Bristol Myers Squibb, GSK, Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer, who again, I'm sure are a number of the customers, the suppliers that are on the call. And M2030 acts as a third-party convener in this program. So we're really there to help coordinate, streamline and align everything that we can to make sure that that ask, to Julia's point, is pointed, direct, and really is meeting the need of API suppliers directly. So this playbook is, as I said, dedicated, and it will explore some of the actions and opportunities that we've identified with our brands and our expert partners that exist in the market, so we can help you navigate that noisy market and can help tackle those specific challenges that arise during API production. So it's a really exciting time to get chatting, I guess, with M2030 as we move into launching the Activate program next week. So yeah, I guess just a CTA here really to get in contact if APIs are part of your business or a part of your business that you'd like to address, particularly when it comes to decarbonisation.
Great, thank you. Yeah, really interesting. I think definitely one to look out for, and a great example of collaboration where lots of people focused on those particular materials. You know, what's best is to come together and standardize it and make an approach that will really help them bring change at scale, rather than people doing work in silos, which is undoubtedly trying to get the same outcome, but creating a whole lot more work. Perfect. Again, one final question for our panelists. Kevin, I just wanted to come to you and not miss out on asking around how interested parties can access the questionnaire that you talked about, because I think an important one that you covered.
Yes, sure. Happy to. And the questionnaire itself has been released and disseminated to our supplier organizations, some of which are represented on today's call, but also invitations for this webinar have been sent out through those supplier organizations. And so that serves as one form of review. Feedback on the questionnaire is incredibly welcome and also incredibly helpful. So anytime you feel like submitting questions, comments, suggestions on how to refine, please feel free to do so. And then that feedback that we receive from our supplier organizations will be considered, and the questionnaire will be revised accordingly. And then the GSCF will post that publicly, both the questionnaire as well as the guidance document. We'll post that through GSCF's website, so everything that comes out of our task force will be available publicly.
Great. Sounds really good. Yeah, and a great culmination to the hard work that's gone into it. So thanks for the information. Yes, just coming back to you, another question that I had was for companies and organizations already using other tools, how is M2030 any different from CDP or EcoVadis? And I think actually that was one of the questions that came from the audience in the chat, which is a nice pull together. So great to show that difference, because I think it's a question that gets asked quite a lot.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, I think what's come through very strongly in everyone's presentations and also the discussion so far is that we are all cognizant of the need to streamline and not compete. And we don't want to add any more noise to an already very busy market, particularly from, you know, software and tool perspective. So I guess the first point of difference is that we are a team of people. We're very much using our cloud-based platform as a really vital part of our program, but by no means the only or the most important part of what we offer as part of the climate action program. So that would be my first bit of feedback there. And similarly, I know Kevin has responded in the chat about how the GSCF is different to or, you know, complementary to the you know, tools like EcoVadis, and it absolutely is designed as such to be complementary programs. And I think that's where we have to start seeing these requests and really understanding that you know, and this is where trusted advisors come into play, right? So with the Self-Care Federation as trusted advisors coalescing brands to offer solutions that are you know, complementary rather than competitive. So that's kind of my first bit of feedback there. But also in terms of M2030 itself, the program and the platform, I think one of the things that we focused on when we decided to build the platform is forward-looking data. So a lot of tools out there are exactly that. They're a tool to gather information, and that means that that information is historical data. So that helps things like disclosures, it helps ratings, but it doesn't give you an indication of where you need to be and how you get there. So that really is the point of difference with the platform itself that M2030 has created, is that through building action plans with you, as much as we absolutely want to offer capacity building as part of that action database, it is an active part of how we build that view, that forward-looking view with you. The more actions that a supplier adds to their action plans, the more estimations of the savings that they can let us know about, the more that we can demonstrate their path to reducing and that path to success. And that also is really important for suppliers to build their business case. You need to be able to see what your return on investment will be, and need to see that in 4, 5, 10, 20 years time that you're going to remain commercially competitive. And more, this is going to become a really big part of your relationship with your customers as a supplier. You'll need to evidence that you are meeting these environmental milestones and that you are someone that they want to be continuing to partner with and do business with. So that's also a big part of why the forward-looking data is becoming increasingly more important. So that's a real sort of strength to the M2030 programme. But I really do think the team of people is the standout feature. We assign climate action managers to every single site that registers with us, and they're there to support with all of that noise in the market and keep you focused on what you need to do, which is reduce. But yeah, we do recognise there's a lot out there. One of the things that we've done to help is that when you enter data into the platform, you're able to download it in a compatible format that is consistent with CDP submissions, for example. So if you did M2030 at the beginning of the year, you'd be able to use that data and not duplicate any work. But the key thing really here is that we are aiming to work with the majority of your customers, if not all of them, at some point, so that you're able to respond to multiple customer asks at the same time. And again, streamline your capacity and your resources there. So there's lots of differences, I guess, across all the different tools. There's no competition there, but I really think if what you want to do is take strides forwards, reduce and get support, then that maybe is the point of difference with M2030.
That's great. Thanks, Sadia. I know quite often asked question, and I think the main thing for me as well is, and the one positive, yes, there's different tools and platforms that can be used, but the best thing is that they're all converging on a critical few, as opposed to, there could well be a tool created and developed by every different buyer and company out there. So by having them converging on the critical few, then it means less for people to populate and engage with, which can only be a benefit, definitely. Thank you for that. I did want to just go back, because I was looking through the chat, and actually, Sham, you asked a great question that Kevin gave some feedback on, just in terms of that we were talking a lot about supplier, so the sort of upstream element of the supply chain, and that was definitely, as Kevin said, what the Scope 3 task force, was primarily focused on. But I think it's a great shout, actually, talking about the downstream element, the sort of last mile deliveries. I think this is an area that needs a lot of focus, and I've actually been part of a few different events that I've been to and talking to various people, saying that this is an area that needs to be focused on next. So don't have a lot more information on that, but I think potentially something that the GSCF could take away and potentially help to do a collaboration on. And then also great point on the further downstream, the sort of end of life part, which is waste management and disposal of packaging and pharmaceuticals. Now, there's another work stream within the GSCF, which is focused on plastics. And I think we touched on earlier around blister packaging and just various packaging that we have. The reality is that most of us are within a space where we have very small format products, which are very hard to recycle, even if they are technically recyclable, because the materials they're made from, they can be sometimes so small to go through our waste management facilities across various markets in the world. So a lot of work has been done on that, and some great collaborations being done within this group and in other areas as well, through consumer health goods, pharmaceutical products and things like this. So we can perhaps post some of those after the event, of where there's some good collaborations and work on that area, because absolutely, Sham, it's a great question, talking about how that's an area to focus on as well, which has big impact on emissions too.
Yeah, and Ben, I think that's an area where tools like life cycle assessments and so on and so forth will be increasingly important. Not to tell folks that they have to go out now and invest in life cycle assessment software or consultants to do that, but in order to really consider how we tackle that end of the carbon emission, the value chain emissions, enabling more sustainable packaging that reduces emissions will require sort of additional new thinking. The technologies there, a really new thinking in business models to what can we do differently than the way we've done it so far. Beyond just sustainable packaging, that will get us to a certain point, but certainly more needs to be done, especially when we consider that 50% of the emissions have to come out of annually have to come out of our budget in order to keep us on track.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just to add to that, I think it's, innovation is a key kind of buzzword that's going around at the moment, but I think it is really key. I think we're realizing in our own business, and I'm sure Kevin and others you are as well, that you can only decarbonize your products so far in their current formats. Before long, you need to start thinking, does a toothpaste tube, does toothpaste need to come in a tube? Does this product need to come in that format? Does various different things? It's trying to think outside the box, because like I say, you'll get so far with decarbonizing that there will be a limit in its current formats, and I think innovation is key and will be going forward with what we need to do. So, but a lot of that can be more longer term rather than the sort of shorter term aims that we have. But hence why companies have a shorter term reduction target and then a further longer term, usually to get to net zero, because there's some hard yards in there to work on, and innovations may be one of those. Sadia, you've got your hand up.
I do, just to add to the conversation, because packaging is becoming much like APIs was in M2030, maybe this time last year. Packaging is coming through so strongly across all verticals: automotive, pharmaceuticals, consumer goods, grocery retail, and others, as an area of focus. So over the next year, and Ben, to your point, looking at that longer term view, we're not going to have the answer in the next 3 to 6 months. But we're really hoping in the next year to 2 years, we're going to have some really strong guidance and commonality on how you would measure the life cycle of your products. And then also things like product carbon footprinting. That's going to become a really strong part of the M2030 strategy from this month. And something that we're really heavily working on is coalescing the convening the packaging suppliers that we currently work with across all verticals and building up a commonality between, getting a good sense of what the challenges are for that innovation, and then really driving alignment on what those next steps are as an industry. So packaging for M2030 specifically this year is going to become a really good focus. And I think this time next year, we'll really look towards having a more sort of fleshed out offering to packaging suppliers specifically. And then much to your point, Kevin, including logistics in that. I think it's always the thing that's put to the side. It's complicated, it's not hugely direct, but that's going to become a bigger part of the conversation as well. So great, just again to echo that we're aligned in all of that as well. There's a lot of alignment, and at the moment I think the key challenge is the connection. So sessions like today really do help with that. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
Yeah, great addition. Thank you. Julia.
I just wanted to add another point. I think there's a lot of conversations going on around measurements, and which is a fundamental part, because obviously we need to track what we are doing and measuring our impact. But I think there's a great opportunity for collaboration outside of the measurements. So, for example, initiative was mentioned, multiple deliveries to pharmacies, for example, last mile deliveries. That is a systemic change that require collaboration. All parts. So there is a reason why there are multiple deliveries, storage facilities in pharmacies, storage management. So it's a broader collaboration that can be initiated to actually have some real action to reduce emissions rather than focusing on the measurement. We can also focus on collaboration to to actually put some actions in motions to systemically reduce what we are doing as a supply chain.
Absolutely. Yeah, great insights. Thank you for your addition. Great. Well, we're almost coming up to time here, so
Ben, if I might,
sure.
I'd jump in and I guess with an audience assembled, I hate to not take the opportunity, but as I said, the task force on supplier carbon is rapidly moving to craft its final documents. And I guess we are, as a task force, thinking about what might be next. And so I would, Padma, if it's okay with you and the group here, I might just ask the audience, how might GSCF, through this work stream or others, assist you? What are the challenges that you're trying to work through, and how might GCF serve you? And feel free to either post them in the chat or open your mic, but just thought I would ask.
Well, I think if we've got no more questions from the team, I'd wonder whether we give people a bit of time back. Padma, does that work for you? Or have you seen any more questions come through? Okay, well, I don't want to close the webinar without, well, first of all, thanking Padma and the team at the GSCF of organising this and getting everyone together, but of course then our panelists as well, who've a real wealth of knowledge and great insights that we've got from the call today. So thanks to everyone that's put that forward. Hopefully it's been really useful for the attendees. Please give any feedback afterwards. And yeah, I think just if I had any reflections on what we've gone through here, is that, you know, really collaboration is key. I mean, I made a few notes from Julia, some great information sharing from your side about how you've set, you know, commitments against scope 1, 2, and 3 as a business. Really important to set those commitments, to have something to work against that are aligned with science-based targets. You're reporting against GHG protocol and sharing that information with all parties. But a lot of that takes data. It takes data, and I think Ben talked a lot about, you know, data is a hard ask from various different parties. So harmonizing that data, setting standards to really help companies and suppliers was key, and the real call out that he had. And then we had information from Alejandro and Sadia about, you know, collaborative groups, one being an industry one in the PSCI, where they've set principles, shared tools for suppliers, and come up with a maturity model. I think is really, really powerful. For check that out. And then Sadia from an M2030 point of view, a great platform that, of course, Hayley and I can say we are using and benefiting from, that's trying to really set and create that global standardization across multiple customers and suppliers, and building that critical mass type platform that helps to standardize, support with tools, set action plans, and report out on data for various requirements. And then in another example, Kevin, you went through obviously the great work of the group to create this supplier questionnaire, and balancing that need for buyers like myself and you and others, that we need information on our own footprints and that from our supply chain, but equally not making the questionnaire too onerous. So it's another one to look for as well. And my final reflection is that, you know, prior to coming into this sustainability space, I, you know, worked almost 20 years in supply chain and procurement. I know this is just one topic. You know, we ask a lot of our suppliers from a buyer and a manufacturer point of view. If we're not asking about these type of topics, you may be getting a cyber health questionnaire or another questionnaire or a financial questionnaire. There's a lot of information that we ask for, but I think the main thing is that, you know, there is this big climate challenge that we have that everyone has a role in playing to work on. So we can't avoid it, but the main thing that we can do is collaborate as much as possible, so that tools such as the GSCF questionnaire and platforms like M2030 provide a critical view that everyone can engage in, put information on to service many customers and players across the industry. So thanks to everyone for their time, and we will wrap up there. But yeah, look forward to engaging with all of you again very soon, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so
Thank you
much
all.
for moderating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks all. Bye bye.